Hi, welcome to 2020 Tasty Treats with GourmetQuilter. We're having so much fun. This time we're doing some foundation piece blocks. There's a diagram here of the 20 blocks that we're doing. We're doing one a day for 20 days. There's more information on GourmetQuilter.com. You can purchase the patterns there, and then you get a daily pattern download while this particular pattern is running. So we're doing foundation piece blocks. We've already done 4 and they're looking pretty good. We're foundation piecing onto paper, so if you have signed up to receive the pattern, this is what you'll have. You've got a diagram of the finished block, you've got all your patterns that you can print out ready to use, and then we're just cutting the pattern up just roughly outside the dotted line. The dotted line is a final cut for the segments. So some of these little blocks are done in segments, and this time we're doing a cupcake and it's in 4 segments. So it's going to be quite fun to do. The base is quite straightforward. This part here is perhaps a little bit more fiddly with some little corners on it, but other than that it's looking fun to do, and I'm just about ready to eat that cupcake. So I've already cut out my pattern into the rough shapes. I've cut out some fabrics ready to go with everything, my colours, and just some fairly generous sizes to go with things. So I'm going to do a slightly different colourway this time. That's my little cupcake casing. But I think we'll start on this one here with the actual piece of cake and the icing on the top. It's always a good place to start with a piece of cake. So piece 1 is the actual piece of the cake. So if we look on the diagram here, we can see that this piece here is kind of like the cake that just spills over the cupcake casing, and then you put the icing on top, and how yummy is that? So I'm just going to place that behind my pattern there, and I'm just going to pop a little pin to hold it in place. And then I've got to put the icing on next. This is the larger piece here, number 2. So I just want to position that so that it's going to flip up. So it's like a stitch and flip, but we have to make sure that we've got it in the right place so that it flips where we want it to. And sometimes a light source underneath helps. I can actually see just with the light in the room, but I have a light box. Sometimes if you don't have a light box, you might have a little lamp that you could put underneath, or a glass top table with a lamp. So I'm just going to sew along this line here now, just extend just a little bit beyond the edge there, and also I'm using a smaller stitch length than usual. This banana normally has a 2.5 length as a standard length for stitching, and I'm using a 1.5, so it's a little bit smaller. We do that because we're stitching on the paper, it perforates the paper because we're going to be tearing that away, and it also gives extra strength when we do that tearing away to what's left, so we don't want to be messing all that up. So I'm just going to flip that back on the stitch line and trim that seam. We're just doing 1/4 inch or ever so slightly less, and then I can press that up. How delicious a cupcake. So, and then the next piece it's suggesting we do, so that this little cupcake here, I'm not sure if you can see on here, it has apparently got little rounded edges. They're not actually round, they're little tiny triangles, but to achieve that we need to pop some of those little pieces on here. So I've got some small pieces of fabric here. So for piece A3 is very tiny, if you can see that, but it's kind of essential. These things make all the difference. So we just put it on and just stitch it, and you'll find that when you get to the end, it's things like this that make the foundation piecing so worthwhile, because you get those really nice shapes with funny little pieces that you would have great difficulty sewing together just on a regular seam basis. You still stick to a flipping and trimming and stitching and pressing, and so we can pop this other one up here as well. So the icing has it's a slightly different angle, but it also has a triangle to indicate the shape. So I just got to position that one so that it's sitting well there. So we're just coming up this line here now. And I'm just going to flip that back along that stitched line, trim all those unnecessary bits off there, and press that little piece. A lot of pressing. You could do it with a finger press, you could do it with a little roller, you can have little tools that are finger presses. I just like the iron. So I've done that side, I've got 2 more to do on that side. I might go ahead and do those and then come back and show you the next stage. So I've gone ahead, I've got my little corners happening, I've done one side piece, I've just got the other end to do. There's really nothing hard about what we're doing, they're just this flipping over. I do like to work with pieces that are just a little bit generous. They could be touch smaller, I could be cutting them to shape, but I think that for this sort of thing we're really not using a lot of fabric anyway, and we've often got little bits and pieces in our stash. And this is a great way to use up all sorts of odds and ends, because you just do need such small amounts. I'll just peel that back, and then I'll just trim this shape up, and it starts to look a whole lot more exciting when you get rid of all these weird bits. And this one's going to be so delicious. So it's looking a little weird at the moment, but if we now trim down on our dotted lines, it'll start to look a whole lot better. And here's a final one. And that's all of a sudden looking a whole lot better. So there's some funny little bits here, but they disappear in the seam allowance when we join, so we don't need to worry about things like that. I think that's looking great. I think I'm going to make the cherry on the top. The cherry, however, is made in 2 pieces. So part of the cherry is on here, this small triangle, and part of the cherry is on here, so that when it meets up, that becomes a cherry on the top of the little cupcake. Very clever, isn't it? So I'm going to go ahead and do my little cherry section, and I'll come back and show you at some stage where I'm up to. So I've been busy putting together my little cupcake. It's looking quite delicious, however it is missing its cherry on the top. So the cherry is actually in 2 parts, it's on 2 different segments. So I've already made one that's going to go on there, and I'm just in the process of making this other one. But I just thought I'd show you, because it's all these funny angles again, just to remind you how we do the funny angles. So I've already just put one piece on, and this one here I'm just going to fold that over on the line that we're going to sew, so that we can lay our other piece that goes behind there, behind the area that it's going to cover. So it's just covering this narrow strip here, but it also has to come out with the seam allowance as well. So I'm just going to place that on so that I make sure that everything, and I can just see through the back of my paper here, is there. So it's got to stitch along here, so I can make sure that there's enough there, and there's enough to cover all that. So I can now flip that back and make sure that that stays there. I can put a pin in if need be, and stitch along that line, and then when that flips out, that will cover that piece there. Amazing, isn't it? These back to front things, they can just get you a little confused sometimes. And so that's going to flip out there and cover that area there, and look at that, it does. Isn't that amazing? There's still another piece to come along the top here. Oops, I haven't trimmed it yet. Fold that back and trim it. And I can press that. And now I've just got the larger long triangle to put on there, and I've just got a strip here that I can put on, and as long as it's going to cover that corner, and you can do the same thing. You can fold that to make sure that that's all covered, and it is, if I position it there like that. So I think that that's great. I'm just going to go ahead and sew that on, and then I can trim that down, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how we put it together so that the cherry sits on top of the cupcake. So we've got a cupcake and 2 parts of a cherry. How exciting is that? So we need to sew this small triangle onto this cupcake here so that we've then got that straight line to go through with that segment there. So when you make segments, there's always got to be a straight line somewhere that you can sew pieces together with. So I'm going to go ahead and pop my cherry, half my cherry on top, and then we'll be able to put the other half of the cherry on top of that. So that's come out so far so good. I'm going to press that seam open. And then, because I'm going to be sewing across here, I'm just going to pull out part of this seam allowance here so that it's not extra bulk and hard to get out little pieces later on. So that's looking pretty good so far. Now we just need to sew this piece right the way across, and we'll have that delicious looking cherry on the top. So just when you're positioning it here, just keep an eye that you think that it is going to all match up, because those seams, it's quite important that the cherry is looking a bit like a cherry, I have to say. And hopefully it will. Of course things do happen and things do move, but we're going to go with it will work. I'm just going to have a quick look here, make sure my seams look like they're lining up, and it's looking pretty good. And I think that is looking pretty much excellent. Excellent, actually. I'm very pleased with that. I'll just press this seam and then you can have another look. And hopefully you'll think it's looking excellent too. So there we have a very delicious looking cupcake with a very delicious cherry on the top. I do like cherries. So, and I can pop this up here, there next to its friends. There's only the papers to pull out now, so I can do that later. So that's block number 5. So we're doing really well on our foundation blocks. We've got another 15 to go only. So that's looking good. So please have a look on GourmetQuilter.com. Otherwise I'll see you back here with foundation block number 6. Thank you.